let's talk about this. I want to talk about our conversation at Carnegie Hall with Robert Smith. We'll do the full Carnegie Hall recap later on.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's always a pleasure whenever you get to speak to Robert Smith. Great guy. We had a conversation with Robert Smith and Paul Judge at Carnegie Hall on my birthday, ironically enough. And
Amazing.
we spoke on stage for about 45 minutes, and then we had a conversation off stage. And one of the things that he's very passionate about, and he's actually spoke about this on when he came out in Malaysia as well, is the HBCU broadband issue. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people are fully aware of. And we actually put a tweet about it, and we put it up, and it got a lot of traction. So just want to kind of cover that because this is actually a pretty time-sensitive news event that I think deserves attention. So this year, the Biden administration and state governments are spending $65 billion on broadband infrastructure. So they have an infrastructure project to upgrade America's broadband system. It's the largest investment in our lifetimes when it comes to broadband infrastructure. Yeah. So here's the thing. This is why it's important. I believe there's 101 HBCUs, and those HBCUs, those 101 schools, produce 50% of all black engineers, 50% of all black attorneys, and 85% of all black doctors. So the majority of our black professionals are coming from HBCUs. So the HBCUs are important, right? But here's the problem. Only 82% of HBCUs exist in broadband deserts. So we talk about food deserts a lot, but we haven't really spoken a lot about broadband deserts, whereas it's hard for people like, we live in New York, or if you go to LA or Atlanta, it's hard for people to fully understand, like, there's really broadband deserts in America. But when you go to a lot of these HBCUs, they're in Mississippi or Alabama or Louisiana or rural parts of Texas.
Yeah, South Carolina.
These are rural communities where they don't have the same internet power or broadband access that we have the luxury of having in New York, in Miami, in LA, in San Francisco, different things of that nature. So that's a major issue because that prevents not only the students, but also communities. Because it said that half of the black people that live in America live around 70 HBCUs. Yeah. So half of the black population lives close to 70 HBCUs. So HBCUs not having broadband access is not only bad for HBCU students, but it's also bad for the communities. Yeah. So now you see it's bigger than just a college issue. Yeah. It's a black American issue. It's an American issue, but it affects there's so many different ripples that go into play here. So Deloitte did a study, and they said that even increasing the broadband penetration, by 10% would have created more than 800,000 jobs from 2016 to 2019. And McKinsey found that closing the broadband gap was one of the solutions to add more than $300 billion to the economy to actively black consumers. So this is something that's extremely important because you have to put a proposal to be thought about to get the money, right? So it's one plan costs $450,000. So 70 plans for the HBCUs would cost around $30 million, right?
Well, there's a couple parts to it, right? So the first part is that the federal government is going to release the funds to the state. The states have the right to disperse the money to people who have submitted plans. And so one of the things when we spoke to Robert about this, one of the things he did was took the initiative to create a plan. And so he created a plan around an HBCU. And the total cost of it, you're right, was $430,000 to create not a broadband desert, but have active broadband inside of a HBCU, which in turn gave broadband access to the community surrounding that HBCU. You want to keep going?
So it's extremely important because the funds, I believe, are going to be dispersed starting in June.
The plans have to be submitted by June, the funds will be dispersed by the end of this year.
Okay.
So we got.
So it's time sensitive. Long story short, it's time sensitive.
Jesus.
It's extremely time sensitive. And if this doesn't happen, who's to say when this is going to be done again? So this is very important. This is very important because there's no way to survive in this economy without having proper internet access. Yeah. From an educational standpoint, like it's hard to learn, it's hard to communicate, it's hard to get a job, especially now a lot of jobs are remote, right? Mm-hmm. But you can't really have a functional job remote if you don't have high internet access. Yeah. So there's so many different things why this issue is important, and this is something that elected officials should be held accountable for making sure this happens, not only on the state level, but on the presidential level as well.
Yep.
President Biden and the whole administration. This is something that needs to be talked about a lot on the National Black Caucus, to Republicans, to Democrats, to everybody. This isn't a partisan issue. It's just an issue that just needs to be done. Yeah. So regardless of what your political affiliations are, politics does play a part. And you can't just brush it off to say, well, politics aren't important, because they kind of are important, because this is an extremely important issue. And this is solely a political issue. Like, the politicians are going to decide this issue. So this goes back to my whole philosophy on voting is important. It's just a matter of a strategy put in place. Just voting blindly for somebody, no, that's not the best way to go about it. Having super PACs, holding people accountable, picking and choosing strategically who you put in office so they can uphold the agenda. That's part of the political process that's important, and that's something that we haven't done. We've done a good job as far as just voting, but that really hasn't made too much progress because we haven't put the economic power behind it. We haven't put the pressure behind it. We haven't put those have to go hand in hand with voting. It's not good enough just to vote. You got to have political plan and action and money behind the votes to make the politicians do what's important. And you have to be aware. That's another thing. A lot of people don't even know this even exists, or they might not even know why it's important. So hopefully now, after explaining it, you not only know why you know it exists, but you also know why it's important.
Yeah. And I mean, it poses the real question, right? Let's get even more context to it, right? So if there's 70 HBCUs with 50% of the African-American population living in proximity to them, if we did that, right, if it took $430,000 for one school, if we did it for all 70, the total is somewhere around 31 million.
It's 30 million.
31 million, right?
That's crazy.
We're talking about an infrastructure bill that was passed for $65 billion. 30 million is always going to...
And we won't even talk about how much was sent
we're
to
talking
Ukraine.
about bridges, tunnels, infrastructure, broadband. 30 million can provide adequate access to the internet for half of the African-American population. $30 million. So think about that, right? Like, think about what life would look like if there was no broadband. Like, and they pose a question: would Earn Your Legion exist? No. How? How could we exist without the internet? Right? We wouldn't have access to this. But imagine what that does for communities now that have access, right? If we want to have the best, how can we compete if we don't even have the resources to adequately research, develop, learn, teach without having the infrastructure? 30 million is it sounds like a lot of money, but when you're talking about a bill that's going to be 32 billion is going to be put toward, internet infrastructure. Yeah. This is a small feat. The fact that we don't know about it, there's no excuse, right? We're telling people about it. We're making people aware of it. We have people, when we put up the post, ask what is broadband, which furthermore tells us we have, when we say we're far behind, we need to be on top of these things. This is something, like you said, this doesn't happen every decade or every 3 decades. This is a once in a lifetime thing. And to not have us as a priority and as part of this infrastructure bill is a travesty. If we don't do something, who knows, right? When Robert Smith was on stage and he was talking about the fourth industrial revolution happening, this is going to be a major pillar in it, right? Because, they can pass this bill now, but what happens is they disperse this money over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And if you're not in
Year,
any
20
of
years,
those
yeah.
plans over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, where is our community? What happens to our HBCUs? What happens to our best and brightest and most intelligent from our community? What happens to them? That's what's on the line here. And so, like, it's a serious issue, and it's something we can do. I know we put the link up to where you can write to and where you can submit plans, and it's done, right? Like, his team, they've done it. It's a proven thing that works, so we got to take action.
My first thought is if we don't get this money, that's an act of intellectual terrorism. My second thought is, what does it cost to repair the water supply issue in Flint? So when we're talking about these topics, and this is why like us taking action is really key, the water desert, the food desert issue that exists in broadband, healthcare issues that exist in our communities, it's a travesty, man. Like, for $30 million to not go to our communities, but billions be shipped to Ukraine and other nations, I think it's heartbreaking. So whatever we can do to make sure that we get this money, please, let's do it. I feel like our communities are being actively attacked in very secret and quiet ways. This is heartbreaking.
Yeah. So anything that we could do. I mean, we have a platform. So as a media outlet, it's our job not just to educate, but to also spread awareness. And news is extremely important. So we get to, that's the good thing with being a media company. You get to curate whatever you want to talk about. So if the vast majority of people are not talking about it, then we have an opportunity to talk about it. And hopefully, people will take action from learning about it and, learn more about it and raise more awareness, spread it on your platforms, and hopefully it becomes a trickle-down effect because it's important. And like Ian said, millions of dollars get sent to Ukraine, and God bless. But ultimately, we have to find a way to make sure that American citizens are sufficiently taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because if not, it's only going to be bad for the country. That's why I'm saying it's not a black issue. If black people don't have broadband access, if HBCU people don't have broadband access, that is going to lead to the fall of America because you're shutting some of the brightest minds out of this new age. You're limiting your pool of talent. So it's not something that
and consumer base.
It's not something that just affects black people. It affects all people. So this is something that is important, and glad we got a chance to highlight it. And like I said, I'm gonna tell the rest of the Robert Smith story later on, but that one in particular was important to talk about mid-show.
My graduates from my school being Forbes, bag drop.
Bag drop.
A mic drop, bag drop.
Bag drop.